right, we are live. We are back. Second season of the SSP podcast. I'm Joe Service.
Alex Loosebrock.
How's it going, everybody? We are coming out of a crazy and hectic summertime. We are officially back into our in school year training hours. All right, most of our guys, if not all of them, are back in school. And so that frees up a little bit of time during the day for us to get our podcast going again. I think what we really want to talk about today is we'll kind of put a bow on what the summer was like for us, some of the things we were focusing on in the gym, and how we kind of connected some of the dots with all or most of our athletes being in season, and some of the things we were focusing on, what we saw there, and then what it's going to look like now that we are starting fall. And for us, it might feel like we're officially into the off season with most of our baseball players, but we do have our softball players who are in season with their high school seasons just getting going, as well as the majority of the baseball players in here are involved in fall baseball. And so what we want to talk about is how we kind of navigate that transitional phase. We're coming out of summer ball and going into fall and what that looks like and some of the different focuses we have for the athletes. Yeah, that's kind of what we want to talk about today as we kind of get going with our podcast again.
Yeah. Just to start out with just talking about summer stuff. We had our summer training camp that you, Kyle Kubat, Tyler Goodrow, and
Bob Levac.
Bob Levac ran out at Millard North's high school
Millard North High School.
on Mondays and Tuesdays. And we had our normal training sessions and stuff in here throughout the entire week. And so tell us a little bit about what the summer kind of looked like out at the field for you guys.
Yeah, so the summer camp, we ran that on Monday and Tuesday mornings. We had two different groups going. So we had a group that started at 8 o'clock every morning, and that was our younger athletes, so like 13 years and down. And then starting at I think it was 10 or 10:30, we have a little bit of a floating schedule there. We would have our high school age group come in, and that was really, it's the second summer we did it. I think we had like 50 or 60 athletes out there, so it was a good time, really good group. And the idea there is just, you guys might have heard me talk about this before, but for those who haven't, we wanted to kind of fill in some of the gaps of the summer, meaning we understand that sometimes in the summer it's game, right? And so sometimes like the skill development, skill acquisition gets kind of pushed to the side because some of these athletes are playing 5, 6, 7 games a week, right? And so it was a time where we knew most of the scheduling, as far as Mondays and Tuesdays, there wasn't a lot of game play. Most of the athletes are coming off of tournaments and stuff the weekend prior. So we thought that they were going to have some open time. And what we really tried to do is just get into some of the nitty gritty of like skill development for the game of baseball, right? So lots of fundamentals. We did a lot of base running. We did a lot of, you know, we did a lot of hitting. We did a lot of fielding, balls in the gap, situational stuff. And obviously, with some of our the younger guys, it's a little more remedial. And then with the older crew, we can open it up a little bit more and, get into some of the more finer details, I guess, of the game. So it was cool for me. It's a spot for me to kind of get my feet wet again with the actual game of baseball. In here we work with a bunch of baseball players, but I'm not actually like on the field. When I'm out there, I'm definitely playing a supporting role to the other guys who are like baseball coaches. But it's fun for me to hit fungos. It's fun for me to go out there and throw BP every once in a while. We do some of the speed work that we do in here. We try to take it out and put it into use, I guess, with those guys, so they get a little taste of some of the stuff that we do in here. But it's a good time. It's 8 weeks. It's like 4 or 5 hours a day for that Monday and Tuesday. I know it puts a little bit of strain on you guys just because I'm not here, but we had some really good guys in here helping you out this summer
sure.
to kind of support the athletes who are in on those mornings. And yeah, year 2, I think it was a success.
Let's go. That's big to hear. And you brought up the continuing to work on skill development while doing all of the training, or not all the training necessarily, but like all the in-game stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how, if you're doing all these games like in the spring and then you do it all throughout the summer, that's a 5 or 6 month window where there's not a whole lot of skill development being taken care of. And like guys that do spend the time taking care of that really are giving themselves like that little edge,
Yeah.
moving forward. And then that kind of, helps transition very well into kind of what we had for a focus with a lot of our athletes in
Hmm.
house this summer too, right? You know, a lot of athletes in house were like, yeah, we get you're playing, 4 or 5 games a week, if not more,
Yep.
but we still got to get after it.
Yep.
And that's when we started pushing the envelope a little bit more as we started to, transition less from like strictly like in season, like let's maintain strength and speed to like, okay, now let's try to improve it more.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun in here. And like, it was very helpful too that guys didn't have school, right? Guys
Huge.
not having school
Huge.
is huge because they come in with a lot more energy, a lot more spunk with their step, and you are able to push them a little bit more because I know we've talked about in previous podcasts like stress on the system in any way, shape, or form is still stress on the
Hmm.
system, and by taking away a lot of that, homework stress, school stress, whatever that may be, we're able to reroute a lot of that into different ways like training in here or training on the field or
Hmm.
different stuff like that.
Yeah, it's good. I think the best way that we kind of categorize what the summer looks like is it's closer to off-season training for our guys than like the in-season training. Like when spring baseball is going on, we both feel very strongly that they need to get a stimulus in the weight room, but that stimulus has to be in season, right? So it's I don't want to say that we're just trying to maintain because I think you can still make gains through that in season period. But obviously, it's a lot tougher for the guys to get in, right? So instead of working out 4 times a week, like maybe they were able to do in the summer, it's like once or twice.
Yeah,
And that is because they have the school responsibilities still. And then they have whatever's going on after school, games or practices, right? And so the nature of that beast just it kind of is what it is. But in the summertime with the school session being done, we can train in the mornings, and then even if they have games later that night, most of the athletes that we're kind of putting into this kind of quote unquote off season summer training are ones that we've been around the block with a little bit, and so they're kind of used to what we're doing. So we understand that even if we are pushing the envelope a little bit more in here, we aren't going to absolutely fry them. Like they're going to be able to train at 9 or 10 in the morning, and then go home, eat, put their feet up for a little bit and go play at a high level that
yeah.
night, right?
And on top of it, like the summer time training is for a lot of these guys is a real eye-opening experience for them that they can train on the same days that they play baseball
That
games.
is, yeah.
And a lot of people struggle with that concept, right? And like, you know, granted, don't be stupid with what you're doing, training, before a game and stuff like that. But your body's capable of a lot more than what a lot of people realize
Hmm.
that they're able to do. And especially when we do have that multi-hour window in between a training session and here and in between a game, guys do have ample amount of time for their bodies to replenish fluids, replenish, glycogen stores, and be able to perform at a high level later on that day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to like see guys mind shift a little bit during the summer and be like, oh, I I
Yeah, I can do
performed
this.
great tonight or like
Hmm.
last night.
We're going to turn the lights back on. There we go. Thank you, Alex.
Um,
But I'm not really big into like, you know, the like mentality and like training mental toughness and stuff like that. I don't know if I think sometimes we give that like too much credit. Um, but it's a mentality shift, I would say,
yes,
for the guys. Like, wait, I can still do this, right?
yes,
And obviously, if they're coming in and they look like they got hit by a truck and we're detecting that or they're telling us that they feel like that, then we go out of our way to accommodate, right?
for sure.
We do right by them and we make adjustments and stuff like that. So again, the programs are always able to be manipulated for where that athlete is on that day, right? But the idea is we really want to take that 2.5 month window or whatever and move the ball forward,
Yeah.
especially since we know fall ball is so prevalent right now. And so it used to be maybe a handful of guys played fall ball and everyone else could dive right back in. But now we're kind of in that navigation mode, not quite like we are in the springtime, but we're navigating school, we're navigating fall ball schedules, and we're still trying to create positive training stimulus while allowing them to go play at a high level,
Hmm.
right? So now we're kind of back into a little more of a juggle mode. but I don't know if I have uh, any examples that jump off the top of my head about guys who were trying to play games and got run into the ground. I know we had a couple of college guys back who we might have had to dabble a little bit with. Now they weren't playing summer baseball, but there was metrics and markers that we were seeing that maybe they were under recovered, overtrained a little bit, or something like that. So we pulled back maybe on a week or two,
Yep.
and then saw them kind of pop right back up
Yep.
to where they should be, and we kind of continued on. And
Yep.
sometimes, we're lucky that we have a big group of. I think this year we had like 20 or so guys back in the summertime,
Something
college
like that. We had
guys.
a lot of guys, and I think at certain points it was almost more because we had guys here for a little while versus guys not here for a while.
Yeah.
And, we had quite a bit of college guys coming in. And it was sweet to have that whole group because, there's a little bit more trash talking that happens on. We're able to get a little bit more into the weeds with some of the training
Yeah.
stuff too, because a lot of them have been training with us for a while and
Yeah.
have extensive, weight room experience. But 100% those like little deloads that we did with some guys. I mean, you saw like numbers on certain metrics, they start to dip down a little bit more. After a couple weeks, we're like, okay, we got to change something a little bit.
Hmm.
Like, how are you feeling? And after would be like, I'm pretty beat up right now. It's like, all right, this week, let's cut our workout pretty much in half. Let's keep load still pretty high, but we're going to cut down reps a bunch and let's get out of here in 45 minutes. And
Yeah.
then the next week after when we did whatever testing, the numbers just shot straight back up.
And the one guy I think that we're both kind of talking about here was also heavy throwing program too,
Yep.
right? So he was really like he would come in and spend 3 hours at the gym. Now that was divided between his training program and his throwing program, but he was putting in a lot of work,
Yeah.
right? And one of the big metrics I think that we saw that kind of like tipped us off a little bit, besides just his kind of demeanor every day, was his velo, right? So we understood that we kind of knew where he normally sat. When we saw that really decrease and decline, it wasn't an injury thing. It wasn't a effort thing out of him. It was just literally his body wasn't responding.
Yeah.
And he was a guy who's dialed in with his recovery. He's dialed in with his nutrition. Hydration was dialed. Like he's got one more year, I think, left to play. So it was really like we're leaving no stone unturned
Yeah.
type of summer. But we were able to pick up on some things and took a step back for a week, I think,
I
right?
think it was,
Three or four
yeah, it was a
days
week. It
maybe.
was a week. It was a
And
full week.
then and then when he was back on the mound after that little bit of a deload, stuff was right back on track
Yeah.
with him, right? And so the other thing we see with some of those college guys is when when their window is starting to close a little bit, they almost, the old adage of like just like more work to work more, right? I don't know if that's a saying. I think I've just made it up. But they think that they need to just keep grinding, 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 grinding when sometimes that's not the answer, right? And especially those guys who aren't playing, it's like we're going to just go pedal to the metal for the entire summer, and our body doesn't always respond best when we're just grinding it down
For sure.
every single day,
For
right?
sure. And like, especially in those scenarios, when we do have a guy that isn't playing baseball for a summer, we get like pretty high intensity
Hmm.
with a lot of stuff that we do in here. He was training 4 days a week and he had two max effort, like high load days, upper and lower. And then he had two high intensity, like speed days mixed in there. And it's a great training philosophy and it works out very, very well with guys. But after a while, especially when you are pushing some pretty high loads,
Yeah.
your body just starts to move slower and it starts to feel a little bit worse. And that was one thing he talked about quite a bit. After we do our throwing sessions, I'd be like, "Hey, how you feeling today?" I feel like I was moving slow. I'm like, "You were moving slow."
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the next velo day we had that week, it was kind of the same thing. And then all of a sudden, we both had to take a step back and be like, "All right, what do we need to do
Yeah,
here?"
let's right this ship
And
a little bit.
it was really something as simple as, "Hey, let's deload you for a week, and then let's ramp you back up the next week." And it worked out amazingly,
And
actually.
just to touch on one more thing with that deload, the deload weeks aren't usually something that we work into like our normal programming, just because the normal ebbs and flows of the school year almost like bring in deload weeks for us unintentionally, right? So a kid is gone for a week playing fall ball, for example, can't train. Now, it's not a full deload, but it's a little bit of a deload from the stuff in here. Maybe they're going on vacation for 3 or 4 days. Maybe, there's a bunch of different things that can crop up during like the normal high school calendar, I guess, that kind of build in those deloads. So I know we don't do official deload weeks,
Yeah.
and that's okay because most of the time, like I said, there's little blips in the radar as an athlete is kind of working through their high school year. Um, but again, this athlete was back for the summer and he was here, right?
Yeah,
He was going, and it was time for a little bit of a step back so we could keep making progress. So
yeah,
that was something that was kind of interesting, and I was really kind of happy with how it all sorted itself out when we made that decision to deload him for a little
yeah.
bit,
And then
right?
on top of it, to touch on the frequency of which we deload guys in here. Like usually, like they're the outstanding cases, like the athlete that we're talking about, where like we actually had to do something like that. But a lot of the times, we create a lot of variability and variance through everything that we
Hmm.
do in here, where deload weeks are more for like system reset, and they're kind of running something very, very similar going on to
Hmm.
the next block. And it's, that on end. And with some of the training philosophies we use in here, we haven't really had to do deload weeks very
Right.
often,
Right.
and that's been nice to see overall. Um, I think we should start pivoting more towards kind of what we're looking
The fall.
for this upcoming fall, and like kind of like I don't know, one thing that's really on my mind about this upcoming, especially with our first block that we're running with a lot of guys. I mean, we have a bunch of guys running pretty darn close to the exact same workout right
Hmm.
now, which it doesn't happen very often. But with the clientele that we have and how often we've been, trap bar deadlifting guys, or you know, safety bar split squatting, or kind of our main lifts.
Sled sprinting.
Sled sprinting is a huge one. We kind of really wanted to take this next month or so to let guys like decompress a little bit, not
Hmm.
necessarily stop pushing the envelope, but introduce some different training stimuluses, and then move forward from there.
I think, yeah, my perspective, our perspective is we've kind of put a system in place, right? And we run that system. I mean, honestly, 48 weeks out of the year, right? Or maybe if we decide to stay on this kind of GPP program a little bit longer, then it would be 4 weeks less than that. But we have our system, and so as we're trying to bring kids back from summer, we don't quite know. Some of the kids are restarting, right? So we haven't seen them maybe all summer. Maybe some of them have been with us for the last 2 years straight, so we know exactly where they're at. But this kind of a little bit of change of pace, a little more like general physical preparedness sort of programming, just ensures that everyone's kind of at the same level before we really start to kind of run our system again with them,
Yeah,
right? So, like you said, some of the things that are a little bit more typical in our programming, we've taken out just to, if nothing else, give their mind a slightly different stimulus. Because, like, I mean, you know, maybe when you and I are training, we can do the same type of movements and stuff. Maybe we periodize them a little bit and switch up reps and sets, but like we don't get as maybe tired of certain movements, but we understand that after like 4, 8, 12 weeks of trap bar deadlifting, the athlete might look for something a little bit different to just like mentally stimulate them,
yeah,
right? So they're coming in, they're learning some different things. We're maybe setting it up in a slightly different way. Like we said, we're taking away maybe our sled sprints that we've been doing for almost a year straight in different forms. And we're doing some incline sprinting outside. We're taking away the trap bar and we're doing a little bit more conventional, which is cool because a lot of the kids have some experience with that, but maybe not in our setting and under our eyes. So we're able to get them kind of all on a level footing. And then once we kind of are all back to neutral, feeling good, maybe some little injuries that have been hanging out, we've taken care of, then we can get going again with our kind of more typical programming
for
style
sure,
that we like to
for
utilize.
sure. And like you said, it's best way to categorize what we're doing is like a general movement prep, right? And I really like viewing this as, hey, we are hard resetting all of our athlete
Hmm.
systems, because they've been playing games for the last 6 months, and a lot of them have been training for the last 6 months, and then add on top of it the 6 months before that, or the year before that, or however
Hmm.
long some of our athletes have been with us. And some of the exercise selection that we put in this have been things they have never done in
Never.
here,
Yep.
and it's really interesting to kind of see how these athletes that we've seen move every single day, how they do struggle with something as simple as like mean, granted, conventional deadlift is a very technical lift, especially if
Hmm.
you want to do it properly. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot simpler than you know
Some of the plyo
than some of even
variations
the
that we
plyo
do,
variations that
or
we run
stuff
with
like
guys.
that.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that we run with these guys can be super complex movements. And meanwhile, we're like, okay, you need to set up a proper way, and you need to pick up a bar off the ground. Right? That's as simple as
Hmm.
it gets for a lift, and some guys struggle with it, and it's
And
pretty interesting.
the thing that's interesting to me too is we've been doing our, whether it's single leg or double leg squat variations. We've been trap barring them. We've been doing heavy RDLs, but kind of the response that we've gotten back from some of the guys after running that conventional deadlift for a week or two so far is like, whoa, if like I feel a little different. And we aren't even pushing loads yet,
Yeah,
right? We're just coaching movements and trying to get them kind of dialed in with how to do it.
yeah,
So it just is a good kind of way for us to bring a little different stimulus to their body. Make sure we're, like I said, kind of cleaning up some stuff that maybe has been lingering for a while,
yeah,
and expose them to something new. And the idea that we're creating a more kind of robust foundation for them
yeah,
as we kind of head into our official off season here in
yeah,
like a 2 months or something like
for
that.
sure. And then the other thing I think that we're trying to really make a point in this movement prep is like spinal health.
Yeah,
That's
we have
another
been.
one we're really trying to make more and more prevalent with stuff that we're doing. Not just anti-flexion, anti-extension work or working within that flexion and extension, but also working in some side bending,
Hmm.
and then loading up that side bend too in different ways. And then I had another one that we've been doing. Oh, and then lateral squats that we've been doing.
Hmm.
That's been a pretty mainstay lift for us for a while. It's kind of an accessory movement for us, but now we're really starting to push the envelope with
Yeah,
that
we
a
kind
little
of
bit
bumped it
more.
up higher, right? So
And yeah,
the if you'd come in and look at our programming, you would see that the big compound lift of the day we usually have right after whatever sort of movement the kids are doing. So whether it's a deadlift or a single leg split squat with a safety bar, that kind of 1A is usually you know where we like to put a lot of our eggs for that day. And then as you move through your card, things get a little more into that accessory basket, right? And so, like Alex was saying, we move that lateral lunge from kind of a uh, accessory movement up into like the main compound. And
mhm,
so it's been a little bit of a shock for some of the guys because they're maybe used to doing this as almost a loaded mobility exercise, into like, hey, this is like a strength exercise and we
yeah,
expect you to load it. So we've been having to remind a lot of the guys that like, what they kind of grabbed for the dumbbells on their first time through isn't going to be where we expect them to be in 3 or 4 weeks.
yeah,
Like they have to understand that this is something we really want to load
for
up,
sure.
right?
And then on top of it, like just diving into that lateral squat movement a little bit, you know, as a baseball player, you need to have a strong glute med. Obviously, your main glute max, you need to have strong, just butt in general, right?
Hmm.
But the length and strength you need to have in your groin is really, really big from the throwing perspective and from the hitting perspective, and
Hmm.
also just from the lateral movement perspective if you're in the field. And so that's why, for me, I really wanted to put that into our programming
Yeah.
because we ran that stuff when I was playing at Creighton for a little while, and that was a main lift that we had when we were running our triphasic cycle.
Hmm.
We had a trap bar deadlift, and then we had a lateral squat, and then we had a front squat with it.
Hold on, pause. I gotta plug the computer in. It's gonna die.
You're good. We're
Okay,
sorry for the shift in the frame. We had to take a little break. Joe's computer was dying.
it's dying. But we're back. So we were talking about just how we're even putting different emphasis on certain movement patterns, right? So we're switching that up a little bit again, just to produce a little different stimulus for the guys, create a little different, focus in each session. Um, Another thing that I know we've been doing in the past, when we get into these blocks, we really take out, you're talking spinal health, right? Take out a lot of our, med ball power rotational work, right? And that's something that I think really, really is good. Again, that's kind of a reset for the kids. Making sure that obliques are healthy and strong, making sure they are, uh, preparing them, I guess, for some of the more power driven rotational exercises that we'll do later on in the program. So a lot of our med ball work, we still are doing some med ball work, but very kind of basic med ball stuff, not fast rotational med ball work. And I think both of us have kind of come around to the fact that we need to be strong and able to brace, but within sport, especially baseball, there's a ton of extension through the spine, there's a ton of lateral bend, there's a ton of flexion through the spine. So making sure that our training is reflecting some of those movement capabilities that we see when players are hitting or throwing,
For sure.
and just making sure that they're competent and capable of hitting some of those different patterns. So right now, we're working through some PVC stuff with that, and then as we go, we'll continue to kind of make that a more robust drill, something that once they kind of have their experience with it, we can complicate a little bit more, or we can kind of layer on some more additional movement patterns there. But
For sure.
I like how that looks so far, and it's the most simple exercise in the world that we have them
And we
doing.
and I mean, we had to make that one up. We had
Yeah,
no I've never seen anyone do something like that to measure,
yeah.
like, side bend or
You
anything
know,
like
I
that.
I like uh, Bobby Stroop is a guy who trains like Patrick Mahomes and Bobby Witt, kind of out of the Kansas City area, and he's really big in like the spinal engine, right? So he talks a lot about spinal engine and how those different sorts of movement patterns kind of connect upper and lower body, obviously. And so I think it was cool because we kind of like drew on some of the stuff that we've seen from him, that we've heard him talk about, and then created something that we thought was going to be beneficial for our guys, kind of using some of those tenets, but like also kind of spinning it into our own type of move,
For
right?
sure. For
So
sure. And, just touch on the point you made about, like, you know, our we're not really doing any rotary med ball work right now with
hmm
guys. During the season and in preparation for every single season for these guys, they rotate so much, especially in one direction if they just
hmm
hit and throw the same way. And at some point, if you want to make sure that the spine is staying healthy, just overall health, you have to take a step back and train it to kind of get back to normal, get back to
hmm
equilibrium for it. And I mean, when we do all of our, new athlete evaluations, we always do postural pictures with
hmm
guys. And there's always some really glaring adaptations that happen with when guys throw and hit the same way or
yep,
just throw and hit overall, right?
yep,
And that's one thing that we have to make sure that we're taking into account. Just overall trying to almost not necessarily detrain it, but like train it so then their body is moving in a healthy and
yeah.
most optimal way.
And I think that sometimes gets misconstrued, right? That health is key, right? So there's many of the adaptations that we see with guys are positive adaptations if you're just looking through the frame of playing baseball, right? So our body creates those adaptations to either help us perform at a higher level or keep us safe while doing them. So it's not like we're trying to look for or create an athlete with perfect symmetry, but we're looking for that stuff that kind of goes outside of maybe like the safe zone as far as asymmetries go, and then bring it just back inside of the realm of safe, I
Yeah.
guess. So we're always going to see like maybe a meteor lat on a throwing side. So if an athlete is a right-handed thrower, it is pretty common to see a lat on that side that's maybe a little bit bigger than his non-dominant
Yeah,
lat.
and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a stronger lat overall. Like when we're talking about like
hmm
most force output or power output out of it, right? But because of all the internal rotation that happens from a throw, there's so much asymmetry that happens. That's
Yeah,
the number
just
one
it
glaring thing
hypertrophies.
that
Yeah.
happens with the right side versus the left, and we got to make sure that the most common thing that we see with throwers is, oh, my bicep or my tricep hurts, or the back of my shoulder hurts, and all of a sudden we test out some of their lat soft tissue, and you pinch it just with the slightest amount
Right,
and it
and there it
cripples
hurts
them.
like hell. Yep.
And it's like we got to make sure we're still able to get in great overhead flexion and we're able to get through that lat in a really,
Mhm.
really positive way. And that's why it's really, really good to do this like reset period,
Yeah.
because there's so much throwing and hitting and move and rotation work that happens throughout the year for these guys, and they never have a break from it. And if we want to create the best athlete possible, we do need to give them a break from it.
Yeah.
I mean, even just think about, when we get our pro guys back, what does the first month of training, 2 months of training
Yeah.
look like for those
Pretty
guys?
basic.
Pretty basic movement patterns, trying to get strength back, trying to get some speed back, but we're not really doing any med ball work. We're not really
Mhm.
doing anything that resembles any baseball movement besides just increasing their athletic,
Yep.
capabilities again and getting them back to zero.
Um, the last thing in my brain that I wanted to touch on, kind of jumping off what you were just saying, is like, so we ran testing a week ago, right? And we had some athletes whose numbers were up and some athletes whose numbers were down. And it was, I mean, to me, I don't even think twice about it, but maybe we need to do a better job of, getting the word out there. It is very common for guys to be a little bit detrained, some of their numbers to be, not at peak performance right now. Again, coming off of such a long and grueling 6 months of travel and play and lack of sleep. And I think we can all, nod our head in agreement that maybe the nutrition wasn't as dialed in when they're on the road
Yeah,
as it should have been. So all these things, even if the kid had been training consistently all summer long, might be down a little bit, right? Their vert might be down a little bit. Their rotational power might be down a little bit. Speed might even taking a step back. And it made me think of it when you were talking about the pro guys, because that's what we see, right? I think it's a pretty well-known thing that at the end of the season you're not going to feel as good as you did at the beginning of the season. So it's just really common for that to happen. And so hopefully everyone understands that, we might not be exactly where we want to be
yeah,
coming back in. And
yeah,
that the testing data shows that and it bears it out. And so now it's time to start rebuilding the guys and get them in a position again whenever seasons start again in 6 months, that they're feeling ready to go.
for sure,
You
for
know,
sure.
so yeah. You got anything else that you wanted to bring up right now?
I not off the top of my head. There'll be more iterations coming up than what we had a brief hiatus
Yes, we
because
did.
we've been busy as all hell during the summer period, and now we're able to kind of get back into some of this a little bit more, and I'm excited to keep diving into some more topics with you
Yeah,
and be on the same screen. We're finally on the same screen as one another. We weren't like that before.
we'll see how this works when we clip it up. But yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to just talk about today, was just kind of where we're at right now, do a little bit of a summary of what the summer looked like for us here at SSP. And I'm really excited for the next couple months to get some guys back, and we'll see how the end of the season goes for some of our pro guys and when they get back in. But yeah, it's looking good. We're excited to be back on a pod, and we'll just keep sharing info as we go here.
Yeah,
Cool.
perfect.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Please.